Hey guys, Colton here. Real quick before we get into the episode, I want to talk to you about the future of chasing masculinity. I want to let you know that we're not going anywhere, but that how it's going to look moving forward is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to move away from the weekly episodes just to make sure that, well, one, I don't get burnt out, but two, that I keep the material that's coming actually important and meaningful and doesn't feel like it's forced or manufactured. So, moving forward, I don't know if there's going to be any disruption in the weekly episodes for a while, but just wanted to say that the episodes are going to come as they come and they're not going to be on the Wednesday morning weekly occurrence. So, thank you for listening. I'll let you get back to the episode. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Chasing Masculinity. Today, I want to talk about something that I've had countless conversations about over the past few years, especially with men who are engaged or thinking about getting married. And that is the question of whether you should have a traditional wedding or whether you should elope. More specifically, whether it makes sense to go through with the stereotypical wedding venue, the dance floor, the music, the catering, the open bar, the guest list that keeps growing, and the bill that starts to look more like a down payment on a house than a celebration. Almost every couple I've talked to has said some version of the same thing. They want to elope, or they've at least strongly considered it, not because they don't value marriage, but because the modern wedding has become something completely different than what it was meant to be. Weddings today are rarely about celebrating the bride and groom. They've become about accommodating everyone else. Distant relatives feel obligated to be invited. Venues need to be massive. Food costs climb per plate. The pressure to perform, to host, to impress outweighs the actual moment the marriage is formed. For most couples, it is nearly impossible to have this dream wedding without either going into debt or having someone else pay for it. Marriage, at its core, is not a production. It's two people becoming one under God. That is the foundation. And if your marriage is about anything else, well, it's worth considering slowing down and asking whether your priorities are actually aligned with what you're stepping into. Eloping, for many couples, then has become a way to return to said foundation, to strip away the noise and recenter that moment where it belongs. Two people before God committing themselves to one another. So in this episode, I want to walk through what marriage is actually supposed to be about, what wedding venues have then turned into, how much marriage costs are really getting up to, and why elopement can be this powerful option to reclaim that, and how to make the wise decisions if you still want to go through with that traditional wedding route without losing sight of what matters. So with that, let's get into today's episode. So I want to start by talking about what marriage is supposed to be. I want to define marriage before we get into discussing weddings. And the core premise of marriage is this: you cannot have a meaningful marriage about how to get married if you do not understand what marriage is. Most of this confusion, the stress, the financial damage around weddings comes from this inversion of priorities. Unfortunately, there are people out there who get married because they want the wedding, not because they want the marriage. The key distinction here is the ceremony versus the covenant. Are you getting married because there's a wedding ceremony or because you want what's on the other side of that ceremony? There's this big event versus the actual lifelong union that's supposed to be formed. There's this celebration, this fun big party where you get to dress up and all the attention's on you, versus the actual obedience to what marriage is supposed to be, what you're called to. Marriage is not primarily a social event or a milestone or a personal achievement. You're not supposed to do it because everyone's supposed to do it.
It is a sacred union established by God. It is witnessed by Him and sustained by Him. The wedding is meant to serve the marriage, not replace it or overshadow it or become what it's about. Men who do not define marriage correctly before getting into it are going to outsource its meaning to culture or to what their family expectations are or to some sort of financial pressure. The clarity here is the act of leadership. Are you prepared to go into marriage for the right reason? There is a biblical foundation of marriage. That is where marriage came from. Marriage is one man and one woman giving themselves fully and permanently to one another under God. This is not symbolic language. That is 100% literal. It is a total surrender of autonomy in favor of unity. Now, people get confused and they think that, well, it's the government getting involved with the marriage certificate. It's a contract. No, there's a difference between a covenant and a contract. A contract protects individual interests. A covenant is binding two people together regardless of the cost. Contracts are broken when terms are violated. Covenants are upheld even when sacrifice is required. Genesis 2:24 says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." One flesh. They're leaving everybody and becoming one. They have unity. So let's get into that a little bit. Leaving. There is an emotional and financial and spiritual separation from the parents who raised you. Leaving the house. A man forms a new primary loyalty. He has a new family to serve. Holding fast to one another. That's permanence. That is the commitment. That is exclusivity. You are becoming one. There is no one else. There is no other option. There is no back door. And you're becoming one flesh. That's a physical union and a spiritual union. There's a shared life, a shared future. You're becoming one. There's also that threefold cord concept. I've talked about this a lot from Ecclesiastes. There's God, then there's husband, then there's wife. Not a triangle where God is optional, but a structure where He holds the union together. Ecclesiastes 4:12, a cord of three strands is not quickly broken. It is the necessity of all three strands to make the cord. Marriage is not fragile when God is then central. If you remove God and the union becomes dependent on emotions or circumstances, or rather just convenience, you are deviating from what marriage is supposed to be. And there's a time horizon too. Marriage is lifelong. It's not seasonal. It's not conditional. It's not based on feelings. You are not signing up for a phase of life. You are stepping into a permanent calling. And that is scary and that is hard, and it should be. And what is marriage supposed to be for? There's a primary order. Marriage is for the husband and wife first. God is the witness and the foundation. Family, friends, community, all of that comes after. Marriage is not for a social validation because you feel like you've been dating someone for a long time and everyone gets married, so you should get married to them. It's not family appeasement. It's not to make your mom and dad happy or to get married before your grandma passes. It's not an aesthetic performance. It's not because it looks good and you like the ring on your finger. And it's also not proving any sort of maturity or success. It is not the gate to get to the next stage of life. There is a leadership responsibility with marriage. A man must be willing to disappoint others in order to protect his marriage. If the wedding is designed to make everybody else happy, the marriage is going to inherit that same imbalance. Now, if marriage is entered into a spectacle or attention or approval, the priorities are already misaligned before the vows have even been spoken. So that's what marriage is. I'm not going to get into a lot of depth about that. That was kind of a real brief. But if you're entering marriage for any other reason, please reconsider, seek out help, do some research. Because if you're not entering for the right reasons, there could be some dire consequences for your relationship down the road. But also, you might find yourself stepping into the issue that we're about to get into, and that is what marriage has become, or rather, what weddings have become, because weddings are built around everyone except the couple. It's a guest list, really. Guests are invited, are often really driven by an obligation to attend rather than an actual relationship, because these invites that are extended to people who are not meaningfully involved in the couple's life. It's your aunt's best friend that knew you as a baby. There is a bunch of social pressure involved with having weddings. There's family politics. You have to invite this person. If I invite this person, they're going to conflict with this person. We have to put them at separate tables, etc., etc. There's an expectation, too, of reciprocity. Oh, you invited this person, or I knew you at this stage of your life. Why didn't I get invited? And that leads to that fear of offending others. It's your wedding, and you're scared that you have to appease everybody else. And there's a whole bunch of logistical consequences. Venues have to accommodate these large numbers of people. Schedules revolve around this crowd management, and these budgets inflate to serve people who are not even going to be a part of that covenant. The covenant is intimate. The wedding has become impersonal. The couple becomes more of a host rather than the focus. There's like a role reversal here. The bride and groom become the event coordinators rather than the actual participants of the event. Instead of being present, they are managing timelines, people, problems. My sister had to stop in the middle of her dance to go write a check to the DJ on the night of her wedding. What a great way to stop any enjoyment you have and have to go back into this management mindset to make sure everything goes off without a hitch. You have to entertain guests and maintain this appearance and make sure everyone's comfortable and satisfied. This stress is replacing the meaning of marriage. I've heard it way too many times about brides actually being way too busy or stressed out to even eat the entire day of their wedding, or grooms barely remembering the ceremony. It goes by so quick. These moments are rushed and they're fragmented, or they're just missed entirely. Back to my sister's wedding. They threw her wedding cake away before she could even eat it, because once they served it, she had to get up and run around, and she was helping others, taking photos, managing some random logistics that came up. And the venue tried to get everyone out of the downstairs into the upstairs dance floor so they could clean up, and so they started clearing all the dishes. They threw away her wedding cake. She didn't even get a chance to enjoy it because she was too busy running around trying to be the host. The day meant to honor the couple has become the day that they're able to least enjoy it. This celebration turns into exhaustion. A wedding that consumes the couple is working against its own purpose. And that's because these cultural expectations have reshaped the priorities. There's been a shift in meaning. Weddings have moved from sacred to performative, from covenant celebration to content creation. My favorite thing is seeing somebody go to somebody else's wedding and they post a bunch of photos on Instagram or wherever, and it's all photos of them and their partner all dressed up in front of all these picture booths and all these nice things. And rarely do they ever even include a photo of them with the bride or groom. It's all about them. It's not even about the wedding. It's like the weddings have become decisions made for optics, not actual wisdom or a lifelong covenant. The meaning has been replaced by this presentation. And it's kind of getting ridiculous on how much it costs now. Getting married is kind of becoming unattainable for a lot of people. There's a deep financial reality to getting married. The modern costs of having a traditional wedding are insane. Weddings commonly cost tens of thousands of dollars. And this is normal or expected. There are people who pay hundreds of thousands of dollars, not on their own dime, thankfully, but still, it is becoming normal to have a $30,000, $40,000 wedding. And who's paying for this? If the couple pays, it's going to frequently involve draining your entire savings, which means you're not getting married till later because you have to save up for it, or taking on some sort of debt, or delaying any sort of financial stability for a while. That, or you are relying on parents to pay for a good chunk of it. The price tag often has little to do with the quality and the sanctity of the marriage. It's just about getting a big venue or the right vendor to make food. Please do not start a marriage in debt. Debt introduces pressure immediately. There's going to be financial strain that affects trust, peace, unity. Debt creates a form of bondage to something else. Marriage should begin with freedom, being able to be with one another, and that's it, not this obligation. Now, understand there's going to be debts, car payments, maybe a mortgage, student loans before entering a marriage. I mean going into debt for literally getting married. A single day should never undermine an entire lifelong covenant to one another. No memory is worth years of financial stress. There's a hidden cost as well of this bloated wedding cost. There is a delayed obedience. Many couples now are delaying marriage, not because they lack commitment, but because they just literally can't afford the wedding. And that leads to spiritual consequences like commitment that's postponed for financial optics or any sort of stability that is delayed for appearances. The very people who value marriage are often the ones who are then priced out of it. And there is now something called the wedding industry. There is an inflation by the very language of saying it is a wedding. The moment you say the word wedding, the price multiplies 5, 10x. Identical services cost significantly more under that label. It's a bloated system. Markups are disconnected from the actual value you're going to receive, but there is an emotional pressure used to justify these inflated costs. The wedding industry profits from this confusion between a covenant and a ceremony. They want you to think it has to be this big, grand, single day because they can justify the price tag. And that gets me into elopement and why it might be a recentering of marriage. I think elopement as a return to the purpose. An elopement strips marriage back to its essential purpose. It removes the layers of performance and the expectation and excess that modern weddings have now accumulated. It is removing the pressure to entertain others, the need to perform for anybody that's not your spouse, the obligation to please these extended circles or extended family members and friends that aren't a part of the marriage. The financial and emotional weight of this spectacle are being stripped away. What it's doing is it's restoring the focus on the covenant. It is literally about these two people. It is presence in that moment. There is more opportunity for reverence rather than this big production. These traditional modern weddings often center around the experience and around the guests and the venue and the food. Elopement recenters the experience around the vows. Choosing simplicity over a spectacle is going to require some masculine conviction. It might not be what you want. It might be a sacrifice you have to make. Leadership often looks like choosing what is right over what is expected. Now, I am a little bit biased here because my wife and I did elope, and it wasn't because we didn't like modern weddings. It wasn't because we had this grand insight on what elopements were and how they could be about the marriage. It was because we genuinely could not afford a traditional wedding. I could not pay for a single venue. We had no money. But I did not want to wait another second to marry my wife. We had a timeline. We had a timeline of a few years out. We were going to do this. We were saving, and we couldn't do it. We couldn't wait that long. We didn't want to. What's the point of waiting when you know you're going to marry somebody? We could jumpstart our life now. And so we did. And at the time, it didn't feel, again, like this grand insight. It just felt like a practical but somewhat reluctant decision because I did want that big, grand wedding. I wanted the $50,000 venue. We wanted this big, beautiful thing where we had hundreds of people, and it was this big show. But it was truly about affordability and timing, not any sort of ideology. But in hindsight, that was the best decision we ever made. It aligned far more closely with what marriage was actually meant to be than what I had in my mind for a big grand wedding. The lack of distraction made the moment a lot more sacred. Wisdom is not always recognized in the moment. I don't think any wisdom went into that. But looking back, it was perfect. It's exactly what we wanted. Sometimes the most meaningful decisions are made for practical reasons before their deeper significance is actually understood. I think there's some great unexpected benefits of eloping. There's no audience, there's no performance, it's just vows that are spoken honestly and fully. I literally didn't see a single person except my wife. We were on the side of a mountain in a place where you couldn't get married, but we were able to show up and get married and leave before anybody could kick us out. It was a place, literally a rock overlooking a cliff. It was just us and someone who could ordain us and then our photographer to capture the entire moment. And that was it. And for the 45 minutes that everything took, start to finish, it was beautiful. I was able to fully focus on my wife. And it wasn't until after the ceremony ended, we looked up and there was a crowd of onlookers over on the cliff that were there for hiking or what have you, that were cheering and clapping and watching the whole thing. I had no idea they were there. I could not see anything else except the moment I was supposed to see. And it afforded us the ability to do something like having a wedding on a side of a cliff where You would never be able to get married, ever. I'm almost positive we are the only people ever to get married in that spot because we were able to elope and go that route. It's not like we just went to a courthouse. Elopement isn't about going to a courthouse and signing papers and boom, now you're married. You can do fun things. You can do something that's meaningful to your relationship. It just means stripping away everything that's not necessary for it. We didn't need a crowd to satisfy. We didn't need this big schedule to manage because, trust me, my wife and I are big spreadsheet people. We would have 1,000 different Excel sheets, a bunch of logistics. It would be very difficult and stressful for us. We pulled all that away. There was an absence of chaos and stress. Literally, we just showed up. I wasn't stressed about a single thing. There was this calmness before the covenant. There was a freedom from the expectation, from the comparison, freedom to experience the moment as it actually is. And I don't feel shame and I don't feel inadequate talking to anybody else who did a big grand wedding because I can truthfully say that how we got married is the best way that we could have gotten married. And it's something that no one else has ever done. I own that. The way we did it is completely unique to us. And so there's no comparison to anybody else. That moment belonged entirely to me and my wife under God. No one else needed to be impressed or entertained. Now, elopement does not diminish marriage. It is just correcting a cultural misconception. Elopement is treated as a lesser or cheaper, incomplete. It's missing something. You're doing it because you have to. That's the misunderstanding that's giving this big wedding ceremony all of its weight. The covenant's just as real. The vows are just as binding. The union is just as sacred. Marriage is validated by God, not by guest count or venue size or budget or social approval. God is not more present at an expensive wedding. Faithfulness does not increase with spectacle. Now, it sounds like I'm pro-elopement, and I very much am, but I have nothing against traditional weddings. I still love them. A part of me still wishes that we could have done something like that because they just have this appeal to them. And there are absolutely ways to be strategic about it. There are ways to get married with a big traditional wedding venue while still keeping your priorities straight, but you just have to use some practical wisdom. Avoid using the word wedding when possible. The same services are going to cost dramatically less when framed as an event or a party, like venue rentals or live music or bands, decorations, rentals, and catering. All of that's going to be a lot less if you don't say it's for a wedding. You're not dishonoring marriage. You're just being financially wise. Stewardship is not unromantic. And then you have to choose your priorities deliberately. That means decide in advance what truly matters to you as a couple, not what the culture expects. You can't splurge on everything. It's not what social media promotes. If the dress truly matters, if you really want a nice dress, then that's where you invest. Or if it's the rings, if you really want to splurge on the rings and that's what's going to be meaningful to you, that's where you invest. If the photos matter, prioritize the photographer. Everything else has to be simplified and stripped down to the basics. You don't need to chase perfection because minimal does not mean meaningless. Simple does not mean cheap. It just means you're being intentional about the things that matter to you and you're stripping away everything else that's just throwing money away. Intention is going to matter more than aesthetics. Now, if you don't want to go with the traditional wedding route, you can do the elopement route, and it's not just going to the courthouse, like I said. It's about the scale and intention, not necessarily the location or the head count. It can be still small group ceremonies. You can have a small guest list. Maybe that's no longer an elopement, but it can be a small elopement style wedding. Maybe it's just your parents and one bridesmaid and one groomsman, and that's it. We didn't even have that. We had nobody because we couldn't logistically invite all the parents, so we said then we're inviting none. It was a lot easier to cut everyone out than to start picking and choosing because all of a sudden, now you have a guest list of 30, 40 people and it starts growing and now you're back to a wedding. It was a lot easier just to say no one. And then you're able to prioritize those meaningful locations. You can get married anywhere for a lot cheaper when it's just you two. And you can find those places with personal or spiritual significance. You know how easy it is to just show up places and get married before anyone can actually catch you? There's a lot of parks and state parks, national parks, beautiful places to get married outdoors. Or if there's a place that someone owns, you could even ask, can I just show up here for 45 minutes? Maybe it's going to cost you a little bit, but a lot of people probably aren't going to care too much if you say you're just going to show up and do a little photography shoot and a quick little 15-minute ceremony. All of a sudden, these opportunities present themselves to have these places, be able to go to some place that's cool and meaningful to you that you would otherwise never be able to do. There are mountains and forests, or even just public land you can just go to. And that's because elopement allows access to locations and experiences that traditional weddings often can't even accommodate. Now, all this being said, please seek some wisdom and some counsel about all of this. Seek advice from married men and women that you respect. Use planning resources wisely. Be intentional rather than reactive. Do not spend money simply because this is a one-time event. One day shouldn't compromise decades. And please do not ever, ever go into debt for a wedding. At the end of the day, this conversation really isn't about weddings at all. It is about clarity. Marriage is not a performance. It's not a party. It's not a milestone meant to impress other people or to satisfy these cultural expectations. It is a covenant between a man and a woman under God for life. Once you understand that, a lot of the confusion around how you should get married starts to fall away. If you choose to have a traditional wedding, there is absolutely nothing inherently wrong with it. But it should be intentional and restrained and aligned with what marriage actually is. And if you choose to elope, you're not choosing a lesser version of marriage. You're choosing a different path to the same covenant. One that, for many people, removes the distraction and could restore meaning. The danger is not how you get married. The danger is allowing the ceremony to overshadow the covenant. When the focus shifts from the vows to the venue, from the commitment to the crowd, the priorities are already out of order. So please be wise, be intentional, seek counsel. Don't go into debt. Don't delay marriage for the sake of being able to provide a spectacle. And do not confuse what culture celebrates with what God actually honors. Marriage is about two people becoming one under God for life. However you choose to get there, make sure that remains the center. So thank you for listening to this episode of Chasing Masculinity. This is something I'm clearly very passionate about. If this was helpful, please share it with somebody who is maybe engaged or thinking about getting married. And as always, keep chasing masculinity. Before you go, I want to mention something briefly. If this podcast has been resonating with you, if the conversations around discipline, purpose, identity, and what it means to be a man today have been hitting close to home, then my book, 24 Rules of Masculinity, is officially out. It is a direct, practical guide built around the same principles we talk about here: biblical foundations, hard-earned lessons, and clear direction for men who want to live with intention instead of drifting. This isn't theory. It's meant to be picked up, applied, and just carried with you. So whether you're just starting to take ownership of your life or you're trying to realign and get it back on track, that's why I wrote it. You can find 24 Rules of Masculinity on Amazon or through the link in the description. If you do pick it up, I'd genuinely love to hear your thoughts. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.